everyone's attention. Will you guys in the back move up? Come on, this isn't a full room. Move up. Let's get close together. Move forward. Let's have fun. We're going to have a good conversation. Don't hate me. Come on, move up a little bit. You're not going to want to be on your phones, I swear to God. Promise. Okay. I like it. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I feel like we need music. We need like a walk-on song. Yes.
Like a microphone?
I don't really need one. Okay, everyone take a picture. Let's go. Here we go. Everybody have their coffee? Yes. There's bottles of tequila in here? I think that's what we need. Okay. Should we just go? Why not? Can we go? We're good.
Let's do it.
We'll be like a plane. We'll depart early. Okay. Shall we? Yeah. Lead on.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I like this. An engaged room. Thank you, Jamie. I'm Pierre Assayag, CEO founder of Tracker. We are a technical solution that is often the backbone of creator marketing projects and programs for brands. One of our top issues is creator pay, and so transparency is key to what we do. And I'm here with Kristen Nino de Guzman, with Blair Imani and Jamie Goodfriend. I'll let each of them introduce themselves. I have to say that it's special that today is International Women's Day, and I'm here with three amazing women who, as you'll discover, are really the trendsetters in this industry. So what we talk about today is what we do outside of this room. Maybe before we get started, as JB sort of engaged in this front, I'd love to hear from you guys what brings you here, and more specifically, who's involved in creator payment in some way, shape, or form. Whether you're a creator, an agent, an agency, a brand, raise your hand, don't be shy. Higher, come on, I need to see, okay. Excellent, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Now, if you don't believe that there are issues with creator payment, that it's already optimal, just bring your hand down. Otherwise, keep your hand up. Okay, I didn't see many hands going down. Okay, all right, so hopefully we'll be able to offer some answers today. And on this, why don't we get going, and let me do this so that we make this a little more interesting than just reading a resume. If each of you could introduce themselves and at the same time answer a question around how do you think about pay transparency? What is it for you? How do you define it? And maybe Blair, can you get us going?
Oh, fabulous. Hi, my name is Blair Imani. I'm the creator of a show called Smarter in Seconds, so I love to give definitions. That's my whole job. I am a content creator, a strategist, and also a producer. I also have a podcast called Thoughts About Feelings with Michael Threets, who you might know as the library guy. And I would define pay transparency as just, having some sort of standard, having some sort of process so that we can make sure that bias doesn't infiltrate the process of giving people what they're due, giving people what they're worth, and making sure labor is compensated. There is a pay gap between creators across gender, across race, and so having some set of standards will help to alleviate the biases that might come and infiltrate that process. Awesome.
And Kristen, you have a very specific point of view on this because you're founder CEO of Clara for Creators, and so you have a very specific view on the impact and the relationship. So help us understand this better.
Yeah, so really excited to be here. My name is Kristen Nino de Guzman, and I am the founder of Clara for Creators. If you haven't heard of us, we're essentially a Glassdoor and a pay transparency app for creators, which I started after working in the industry for 10 years at platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest, after seeing growing pay disparities happening in the creator economy. And I think for me, pay transparency is such an important discussion because the creator economy is still very much an unregulated industry when it comes to creator compensation. And when you look at the corporate world, for example, we have guidelines and we have salary ranges so that we are not contributing to pay gaps, and that is still lacking for the creator economy. So pay transparency is really important discussion for creators to have with one another, but also, not just within these specific communities of Black creators talking to Black creators or Hispanic creators talking to Hispanic creators, because that's how the pay gap continues when you're only talking to, people in your inner circle. So I think really, my goal as a founder is to help with the conversation of pay transparency and with access to information so that creators can be paid fairly.
Got it. Okay. And Jamie, founder of Creative Vision, and you have a long resume before that is super relevant as well to this conversation.
I'm old.
You've worked, no, I said experienced. You've seen both sides, and it'd be interesting to hear from you as well in the dynamic brands, creators, where are what do we need to not step over, to overstep, etc.?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming and making the effort to be here today. This is such an interesting topic. So I'm a recovering CMO, and I've worked at big brands, and I've worked at agencies. So I've been a buyer and a seller. And most brands are making an enormous amount of mistakes, and I founded my company to help them not make so many mistakes as they're moving their money from, as I say, from TV to TikTok and YouTube and Meta. Most brands focus on brand safety, and they should be focusing on brand stupidity because they do dumb things. And they're focused so much on a creator saying something crazy, and yet most brands have no clue how to pay creators the right way, and then complain about the fact that they have agents and managers and don't want to set benchmarks. So this is an ecosystem, it's a marketplace, but it can't be a marketplace until everyone has the same information. Now, that might mean a brand pays more, and it might mean that a creator gets less, it might mean that a creator gets much more, and a brand pays less. We don't know because every single person has different pricing. And that is not how you build an industry. And this is the year, 2025, I think Leah Haberman's in the room. I don't know where you're sitting, in case you missed it, newsletter creator. She was saying that 2025 is the year of the creator economy is going to be professionalized, and that's what we're here to do.
Absolutely. One very amazing and at the same time very scary stat in this regard that our team was gathering was the fact that the creator economy is set to reach, I think it's $500 billion in 5 years. So just to sort of set standard, $500 billion means that we enter the top 30 economies in the world by way of GDP. So this is how big it is. It's a good 10x from where we are today. So next 5 years, if we're in an industry that is going to 10x, to Jamie's point, we're going to need to find ways to standardize in order to scale. Creators, brands, and middle agencies will need to figure out where's the value add and how things get priced. I will make a confession. We actually started this panel in the green room before coming here. And we're all in this really engaged conversation. I'd love for us to continue it because I think it's really relevant. I shared one stat from a survey that we did fairly recently. The research is not out yet, so don't go try find it, but I promise we'll let you know. We interviewed 500 marketers and asked them, among many other questions, if they thought that creators get underpaid, overpaid, or paid fairly. And 2 out of 5 of the marketers said paid fairly, and another 2 out of 5 said overpaid. And there's the rest, very few, the last 1 out of 5 said, I don't know. So they acknowledged that they didn't have the information. The conversation we're starting is that if we run the same survey with creators, which we'll do, we're most likely to get the same answer, that creators will feel underpaid and undervalued by brands. And guess what? They're probably both right. But until we set some standards and define how this space should be structured and organized, it's hard to get more assertive answers. I'd love to get you guys' reaction, and let's do this more as a conversation, not just me interviewing you. I'd love to get your reaction to this stat. Does it resonate? Does it not resonate? And what shall we do next?
I talk a lot, so one of you guys go.
Well, I think a lot of content creators are under the impression, and I was just on a panel at the Climate Power Conference talking about how so many creators feel like they're not getting what they're owed. And I think that it's also a very complex subject because I know content creators who sometimes are looking at the pay terms, getting down into the information. If it's a net 60, but it's a higher paycheck, I know so many people who would rather take slightly lower pay if they can pay you in a net 7. And so looking at all the different conditions for pay, and just the process is so opaque, and the only times you really hear about content creators and getting paid is when they don't, when it turns into a net 90, when it turns into you having to chase down your paycheck. And I think that's why pay transparency is so beneficial to the brands themselves, so there's a standardized process so that we know all the different middlemen that I'm sure you're going to talk about between you and the brand and getting the pay. And so I think that brands need to value creators, and I think creators need to know how they're getting paid, why they're getting paid, and what their peers are getting paid in order to be competitive in the process. It shouldn't come just down to who has representation and who doesn't, who has an advocate and who doesn't, and it often comes down to that, which you can definitely speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I noticed, especially working with creators like on the day-to-day when I was at TikTok, was that it's like the wild, wild west when it comes to creator payments, and you would have one creator charging $20,000 for a video and another one charging $2,000. And I think on the brand side, it's like so unclear and it's so sporadic, and you have no idea really what to expect when you're reaching out to a creator or their team. But I think for the creators, it's also confusing. I would get the same question every day of like, how much should I charge? And even as someone who had 10 years in the industry, I'm like, well, I don't know, because I see some creators making 20 times what you're making. So I think really what brands can do, if there's anyone in here on the brand side, is just ensuring that you're doing the right thing and not contributing to the creator pay gap. So one thing I've seen quite a bit recently is brands establishing like a baseline rate for creators in a campaign, so that you're not paying any creator under, let's say, $2,500 for a particular campaign. That way, instead of paying one creator $500 and one $10,000, at least you have a baseline, so the pay gap is like lessened. So there are things that I think we can do to help with the disparities that we're seeing, but we're a long way from where we need to be.
Because the process on the brand side, let's just remember, most brands for the last 50 years have been paying for 30-second spots. And 30-second spots are what drive the entire advertising and marketing industry. Then you got into influencer marketing, and that was gifting, and then it started to be in the pay space. So there's not a lot of systems that are recognized as this is the best practice. Most brands don't even realize that their agencies are paying 120 days. They figure, okay, I'm paying the creator. So the creators don't realize that the brands don't know, but it's the brands that are in danger of getting called out. We were talking about this. There's been horror stories where, because of the time delay, so what happens is, if I'm a brand, I pay my media agency finds the creator agency finds the manager, and the manager finds the creator. And that's like a giant daisy chain of problems. The brand thinks, okay, I've paid. The agency doesn't get paid for 120 days. That means that the creator and the marketing agency aren't going to get paid for 100 and God knows how many days. And then the creator thinks, oh, damn, YouTube or whatever, Skims didn't pay me, and gets pissed. I don't know, has anybody ever in the room ever had that situation? Raise your hand. Okay. And you get pissed, and the only thing that you can do to manage that is to go public and have like a customer service problem. So it puts us in an adversarial dynamic when it should be that the creator, the agency, the brand, and all the other people have a grown-up conversation to figure out this is the process. One of the crazy stats, I did some research with the Harris poll, 85% of creators say after a campaign, they never hear back from brands about how the campaign was evaluated, how it performed. And that is insane, because that's all the best learnings. And it's because everyone, I think, is so silent, and this isn't standard practice. But anybody in this room has the ability to ask for that, because all of you seem to be involved in the payment process in some way. Ask for it, and let's start to make it standard practice, as opposed to having it be this Byzantine process of, telephone. I think is kind of what it's like.
It definitely is. I'll speak to an example of that. When you asked, I raised my hand immediately. There was a situation a few years ago during the Stonewall 50th anniversary celebration where I and so many of my friends in the LGBTQ plus community, I'm bisexual, love to come out every day. Any bisexuals in the room? Period. I love you. Okay, so when it came to this campaign, we were like, oh my gosh, we're going to be part of this amazing celebration. We're going to be standing on the shoulders of our legacy. It's going to be involved with people who are at Stonewall. This is going to be beautiful. And then our one friend, who's a photographer, who's the only one among us who had representation, was the only person who got paid on this campaign. So from our side, we had volunteered for what we believed to be an effort that was going to represent the entire community. The next thing we know, we're on the sides of buses and billboards, and the visibility was cool until we all got together at a celebration, and our friend who's the photographer, he was modeling in it, but he's also a photographer, and he was paid to model, disclosed that he got paid. And we're all sitting there a little bit broke, figuring out we didn't get paid. And so this ended up being an issue with the creative agency. The creative agency wasn't being equitable in how they were, dishing out payment. New York City Pride had no idea that this was happening until I got on Twitter. It was back in 2019, back when it was still Twitter, and spoke about it because it was really frustrating and it felt very exploitative. And I think that ends up what's happening. It becomes a customer service issue because I don't have any contact for the people at New York City Pride. The process is so incredibly opaque, and it ends up becoming an issue of, can we get paid? And everyone ended up getting paid after the fact. I would say 9 months after that initial payment was issued to the one person who modeled and got compensated. So it was something that was able to be rectified, but I think it shows that a lot of times brands are not under the impression that exploitation is happening. They definitely don't want to be getting into, crisis calm situations, but it's the lack of the process is going to continue to be an issue, and if we're going to do 10x, we're going to have 10x more of those problems, and it's already, you can see glimpses here and there, whether it's on beauty TikTok, whether it's on, fashion threads, you can see it starting to, simmer below the surface, but it's because that daisy chain and that, game of telephone that happens, and sometimes the only person who ends up being able to speak out is the one with the biggest platform.
Yeah, makes sense, and it's really, really unfortunate because it stands in the way of everybody doing a better job and being compensated for it adequately. I have a very skewed view in the market because of the solution that we offer. What we do as a software company is that we work with brands that are interested in getting access to that information, to the finite details, so that they can actually act on it. So it's very much performance driven. Unfortunately, these are not the majority of brands yet in the market, though the market is getting to us fast. What we're seeing though, and I'd love to get your thoughts and reaction on this, is that when we first bring a new brand into our platform, it's just like shedding daylight on a place that had been dark for a long time, and it feels very uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for the brand, it's uncomfortable for the agencies working with the brand, because, guess what? If you haven't measured something properly forever, it's unlikely to already be optimized, and so you're likely to find a few skeletons in the closet here and there, and it feels difficult. So there's a level of resistance from all parties as we go through this process that is painful. And I'm curious to hear from you guys, one, if it resonates with your experiences, but maybe more importantly, how can we ease this? Because at the end of the day, what I can tell you is that once you get to the other side, it's better for everybody. It's better for the brand, it's better for the creators, and guess what? It's also better for the agencies because now the brands can invest more money with being clear-eyed with where the investment is going to go and why. But how do we ease that transition?
Well, I think Jamie and Blair, and we all talked about it earlier, but I think more transparency in general, even on the agency side, is really helpful because you have these brands spending millions and millions of dollars on campaigns, not knowing where their money's going, and then you have creators who aren't getting paid that much. But the brands don't know that, but the agencies know that. And I think one thing that's really important, if you're working with a creator agency, is just making sure you're doing your due diligence on that agency, whether that's through budgeting, but also in the treatment of the creators that you're working with. Like, does your brand know when the creators are getting paid? Are they getting that 60? Are they getting that 7? Are they getting paid at all? There's a lot, I think, that you can do to kind of investigate how it's going on the creator end. And I know Jamie just mentioned the feedback loop, which is important for creators to understand, if they're getting, how it's going and if their content resonated. But also, I think brands can ask creators, how did it go? And I think a lot of brands would be kind of shocked to know that some of the creator agencies that they're working with aren't paying creators on time, or they're ghosting creators, or the creators are having to research and go through all these different channels to get paid. So making sure that your brand is working with a creator agency that actually knows how to work with creators.
I'm going to say an example. How many people here know Ridge Wallets? Sean Frank, okay, that guy is a ninja. I don't think he's here, but anytime he writes or speaks, I lean in because he is a ninja. And Pierre, you mentioned why it's good for brands to have this transparency. It's because you know how much you can actually spend and have it be good business. And this is the work to become a professional industry. So Sean Frank knows exactly what his yield is when he does integrations with creators. And this is on YouTube, so he has lots of data, speaking of YouTube. And what he figured out is that one of his biggest creators, Marquise Brownlee, anytime he did a post or partnership, his sales went through the roof. So they had a grown-up conversation. He's now part of the company, and he could afford to pay him what he was worth because he knew what the value was for his business. I can tell you most brands have no clue, and that's part two. Part two is the difference between looking at creators through the lens of old school media and looking at them as advocates. There's a big difference between advertising and advocacy. In advertising, I heard a great quote today, you cannot buy a piece of culture, which is interesting, but most brands are still looking at a creator and saying, okay, they have 1 million followers, I'm gonna get 1 million followers. You're not. So they're trying to price it based on follower count, where, as we all know, the algorithms determine how much content, what content, and who sees what. That's your audience. And so by understanding both pieces, brands can actually be much more sophisticated, but that's not how the industry started. It's where we're going. And it's super important to have learning conversations with brands who are making decisions. And I have a lot of tough conversations with people about this because they don't know. And many of them are relying on a creator marketing agency. And don't get me wrong, there's some excellent agencies out there, but there are some that are not so excellent. That's how I'll say it. And they're not teaching the brands and they're not teaching the creators. So I think all of the people involved have to start to get smarter about the money. It's always about the money, and that's how people are motivated and incentivized, is where the money is.
I was going to say, there's also this, speaking of the 1 million followers, the conversation I think that started happening, 2 to 3 years ago around micro-influencers adds such an interesting aspect to this dimension, because it's like, are you buying the follower count? Are you buying the engagement rate? Are you buying the click-throughs? Are you buying the views? And so I think looking at, or are you just buying having this person who is, an expert in this subject who might have more of a niche field, and that's where those micro-influencers come in. And I think talking about standardizing the process is so important, because is it equitable if I spent the same amount of 4 hours to create this video and I have 800,000 followers, and somebody else spent that same 4 hours to create their video and they have 80,000 followers? Is that an equitable process? And it has to do a lot with what those goals are. And I think that sometimes when it comes to campaigns, and I'm often doing this, I'll have a briefing call, but I don't do debriefs, so I'm going to start doing that immediately. And I'll ask, what is the goal of this? Is it brand awareness? Do you want signups on your mailing list? Are you just trying to move product? Are we trying to have an aspect of the culture be part of the conversation? And that way I can strategize my content most effectively. But I think that conversation also needs to be happening on the agency side with the brands ahead of time, so that way they know which content creators to reach out to, and then also who they're compensating, because that labor should be compensated as that baseline, and then we can start getting into the margins on exclusivity. Okay, we're going to be doing ad spend for 60 days. We're going to be doing, you can't work with any other brands for 90 days, or just 24 hours before and after the post. And so I think that's where those higher amounts can come in, but that should be standardized as well. And I think content creators will start to feel better, because this animosity can get created between us when we feel like, oh, you're getting this, we're on the same campaign, I already know you're getting paid more than me. And that's not, I don't think, healthy for the industry.
Yeah, the irony of this whole conversation is that maybe the most overused term in creator marketing is authenticity. And not that I disagree with the fact that the reason why creators are successful is because they resonate with the audience in such a way that their content feels authentic, even when they mention a brand that they truly believe in. But authenticity has to be proxy for trust. And short of creators and brands being able to trust each other, because you feel that you're being compensated fairly, that you're not being taken advantage of, that you know what the intents are, that you trust your agency that is working with you, there's a lot of friction that enters the space and makes it very complicated to do what it is that we preach.
I want to ask Kristen a question. When you're doing deals, do brands, because I find that they do not look for creators, not all creators do the same thing in terms of where they are in the funnel. Some creators are great for awareness and just getting the word out. Some creators are great in that consideration part, where it's like a how-to video or talking about the best way to take care of the product and getting the audience really engaged. And then you've got creators that are really good for more UGC, drive to conversion. I find there are very few brands that understand that, and they think of all creators as all things. And that influences the pay and how their results go. Where are you in that discussion?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a few decision makers at the top who are like, we want to work with Mr. Beast, or, and they're not really understanding their goals and how that's gonna, trickle downstream to the creators that they're selecting. And I think that understanding is really important, because you have creators like Blair who do a great job with advocacy and getting the word out about different movements, and then you have other creators who are great for click-through rates. And so typically what I find is we try to do a mix, right? A healthy balance depending on what the client goals are, but there's way more education that needs to go into the brand side, the decision makers, and helping them understand this is why these creators would be good for this campaign.
I just find it fascinating how few creator teams have access to any kind of strategy or education. There are brilliant people in this space that really understand the business strategy of creator marketing, but they don't understand. For example, we were having a very robust conversation about an excellent best practice is do an organic post, see which one takes off, and then boost those posts with paid. Seems pretty logical, and yet the reason that doesn't happen, Pierre, you were telling me exactly why. You take that.
Yeah, this is the sausage factory and all of its shortcomings. But it's for the most part, it's not a lack of understanding of what you just said. That feels pretty obvious. But for most brands, the way that they are currently structured, it's very difficult for them to do this at multiple levels. Starting with the fact that if you haven't anticipated the possibility that you'll be boosting, it means that after the fact you need to renegotiate with the creator the terms that you have so that they give you the rights to boost their content, which usually is going to take anywhere between 24 to 72 hours at the very least, and often you're going to miss your window for boosting a viral post. Then you continue with issues internal to the structure of the brands between media teams that are typically completely separate from the teams managing and working with creators. So again, you incur delays and challenges in this. The one that comes along with it, so the third challenge, is that way too often you boost in all the wrong places. What do I mean by this? The media team that is in charge of doing the boosting, or the agency, has limited view into the work of the creator and whose audience they resonate with. So they will often click the easy button, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram, to say, just pick the audience on my behalf. And what does the platform do? They do just that, which is they pick the audience of the brand. And what we see through the data, because that's the job we do, we see views skyrocketing and engagement staying flat. What does it mean? That you put your post in front of a lot of people who didn't care for it. And the creators often, when you talk to them beforehand, they will know that. And they even may attempt to tell a brand that it's the case. But they come short of being able to get through. So again, we need to go back to transparency, what success looks like, what do we need to move ahead with on this?
I want to share a bad story that I can't say names, but this is a typical conversation when I say, oh God. Okay, so a big clothing company conglomerate owned a couple brands. The digital team launched 2 apps for 2 of their brands. And one, I would say, is cotton goods. They're both cotton goods, but different parts of your body is what I'll say. One's more commercial, and one's more consumer. Anyway, I don't understand the premise of why anybody needs an app to buy socks or whatever it might be these days. Okay, so I was talking to the digital team. I happen to know the marketing team that was also doing a bunch of work with creators, like 500 creators for campaigns. And I was talking to some of the creators that were participating, and I said, are you doing links so that once your awareness post goes on, you're going to click over and connect to the app? And they said, no. I talked to the marketing side, I talked to the digital side. None of them had talked to each other about connecting the dots and about connecting, it's literally connecting the plumbing. So you had the marketing team spending a fortune to just, just carpet bomb the world. And then you had this digital team that created an app and is like, if you build it, they will come. No, they won't. And the creator's saying, wait, I don't understand. They're not talking to each other. It made no sense, and it was corporate structure. Because typically in organizations, if you haven't worked at a big brand or a big organization, corporations are structured vertically. You've got your e-commerce team, your marketing team, your whatever team, your other whatever team, and people go horizontally. I don't care if this message came to me from the e-commerce team, and I don't care if it came from the whatever team. I see the brand in total, but the organizations don't look like that. So one of the superpowers of creators that I have found is they are literally the canaries in the coal mine, and they can pressure test all the leaky buckets in your team. It's always the creators that figure this out.
It's so true. I also have a terrible story about something that happened with me. I had done a video, I posted it, I knew they were going to boost it, amazing. We didn't get into the specifics of where they were boosting it to. Turns out they picked their audience, not mine. And I honestly don't think it was their audience, I think it was just like the world, like, in general. And as, somebody with a lot of identities who's very outspoken about advocacy, it was not a great time for me. I literally was on a plane, landed to all of these hate comments, and I'm so glad that I have, I'm with DBA, an amazing agency, and they fight for me so hard, but they were like relentless in trying to get this ad pulled because it was just exposing me to more and more hate. And we see this happen so often, so often, especially with LGBTQ plus creators who will do a collaboration with a brand. We can think of many that come to mind. It goes out to more of the brand's audience than their audience. The brand is initially seeking out more saturation within that LGBTQ plus market through that content creator. It ends up going to the more mainstream market, and then you see a lot of hate and backlash. I think what happened with Dylan Mulvaney is a horrific example of how that can pan out. And in my case, it was just, the teams not talking to each other, people not considering what's the goal of the campaign and how can we protect creators, and that's why it's so good to have representation. But it came down to me having to send an email directly to the folks who were doing the ad spend with the permission of DBA to be like, hi, I'm getting harassed, please pull the ad, and only then was it being able to get pulled. And so I think it was so complex. It was really difficult, but I don't think that when people are thinking of doing brand collaborations with content creators, they're so intent on vetting the content creator, making sure the content creator is good, that sometimes the other processes don't get the care that they need because people don't have these learnings. There's not a lot of education, like you were saying, from the brand side about what these processes should look like. And sometimes content creators need to be involved in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry you had to go through this. It's unfortunately
I used to
not
work at Planned
uncommon.
Parenthood. I'm used to it, but it still sucked.
I bet. So we've shared all of the shortcomings of the category that we live in, all of the horror stories, maybe not all, but a bunch of horror stories. You guys know the adage, the future is already here, it's unevenly distributed. I'd love to understand from you examples, like if you have one tidbit of something that has been done right in a collaboration with a brand that actually starts showing us the way into more of this should get us on the right path.
Okay. Well, I touched on this briefly earlier, but I think the biggest thing is like Jamie said, it's about the money. Creators care about getting paid and getting paid quickly. And anytime your brand can do something like set a baseline rate in a campaign to ensure that there's not as much of a pay gap or pay disparities happening, that is going to go so far with creators. And I've seen it firsthand when I worked on campaigns at TikTok. That was something that they did. And the respect, and I think back from the creators of like, oh, well, I was only going to charge this much, but now I'm getting paid this much. Like, they really appreciate that because being a creator is hard and they work in silos and they don't always have access to representation or the proper mentorship that they need. And a lot of creators, as we know, are young and some of them haven't gone to college. Maybe they don't have negotiation skills. So anything that your brand can do to really advocate on the creator side, I think is really, really important and will go a long way and in the creator community. Like that is what you want for your brand. Usually the goal of a lot of these campaigns is to build brand sentiment. Well, you can do that firsthand by working with these influential creators to love your brand and advocate for you.
Can we stay on this for a second? Because I'd love to understand, is this the recommendation you're making or is it something that you're seeing happening with some brands?
I'm not seeing it happen widely.
Okay.
I've seen it happen once or twice, but I would make the recommendation that if you are doing a campaign, you are holding yourself to some sort of standard with the way you're paying creators so that you're not contributing to these massive pay disparities. And like I said, it would help just so there's not one creator getting paid maybe 20x, or at least if that is happening, at least you know you're not paying a creator $200 because that's all they asked for.
I'm a Gen X, so typically I'm not trying to save the world. So I tend to be much more commercial. But I will say that one of the traits that brands need to think about from a purely, yes, it's good for the world, and I think that's important. I do. No, I sound like I don't. Being creator friendly and being a creator friendly brand is a business benefit. It's a strategy, especially like let's look in beauty. Brands that treat the beauty creators well have a much better chance of getting the best talent because obviously creators talk. And if you're a brand that's not creator friendly, and there's better words for that, you are having a business challenge. So that's like being the bully on the playground. I will share an example of something that I thought was really well done. A couple years ago, I did a campaign with Logitech for creators. And not only did they hire creators, but we built a creator academy so that we provided content about a number of different topics for creators to learn because they were the audience. So it was altruistic but commercial at the same time. So it was a win-win for everyone. And we did a series of shows. We had a cohort of creators that were brought in. We gave them equipment. We gave them lessons in terms of how to set up your studio, broadcast equipment. We brought in financial experts. We brought in crisis communications experts, and we helped really bootstrap these creators who were just getting ready to be on the verge of blowing up. And they were not only treated fairly, but they became unbelievable advocates for Logitech. And it was a win-win for everybody and just incredibly effective. That's a good story.
I also have a good story. I can't disclose names, but I did a campaign with a major bank, and it was all about black women and all about investing, it would be a terrible time to not have paid those Black women content creators that you hired on time to talk about fair pay and equity and the inequities in the banking system. And so one of the things that they did was earmark, out of their budget for that campaign to go directly to the content creators themselves. And that doesn't always happen very often. Usually it goes, through to the media agency, and then it goes to the talent agency, and the talent agency deposits to the content creators. But I think in this specific case, given the subject matter that they were discussing, it went directly to the content creators, and then the commission was paid directly to the media agency. And I thought that was very smart because it was no ambiguity. You knew exactly when it was coming and on such a hot button topic. And I think that, I'm not sure if that could become a standard practice, but I think it is much more pragmatic. That way you don't have this daisy chain of the net 20 and da-da-da-da-da-da. So that way you still have the media agency getting paid for hiring and bringing in the content creators and scouting them and vetting them. You still have the agency getting paid for negotiating, because it's not about these standards that we're trying to set industry-wide is not about trying to remove agents or remove the media makers outside of it and just getting it directly to the content creators. We still need this infrastructure. It's about making sure that everyone is paid equitably and paid on time, because those two conversations have to be happening in tandem. And so I thought that was brilliant, because it would have been a very bad look. So I think all the money that it cost them to do those individual transactions, they made back tenfold in the lack of crisis PR that they had to hire.
It's awesome stories, guys. I appreciate you sharing them. I'll add one to this, that some of and again I'm representing more of the brand side in that we work primarily with brands. Some of our largest customers have gone all the way to requiring from their agency partners full transparency on data, and just that seemingly simple thing is completely changing their practice, because now that they know how much each creator makes, it gives them the opportunity and the responsibility to make sure this is done right. And that having access to the data and being able to act on it, we've seen, is creating a sea change within these organizations. Hasn't reached the media teams yet, so the boosting is still out there to be figured out. But at the very least, by way of which creators to engage and what fees, and when we have a negotiation, have it be completely open to say, Jamie, love your content, but we're not going to pay you on the basis of your number of followers. This is what you represent to our brand, and here's why.
But I think it would be helpful, because you say that, but it's hard for people to understand what you mean about can you go into a little bit more detail? Because I was on the other side of that. I was at an agency that one of our clients started using Tracker, and they said, okay, now you have to run everything through Tracker. And we were like, and it was a lot of work, but I could see the benefit of it ultimately for the brand, because they had knowledge. Yeah. But can you just explain that part?
For sure. So again, if we go back to when we bring in a new client onto our platform, very often the way creators get paid before we come on board is that the creator fee gets rolled into the agency fee. And so the company is going to pay the agency a big fat check. At times it's campaign to campaign, other times it's a retainer. And the agency figures out who gets what within that. So what percentage of that fee is going to go to the creators, and then what percentage of the creator fee goes to each creator individually. And the brand has zero visibility into any of it. Large brands will work with 20, 30 agencies all at once in one market. So multiply that by the number of markets that they're in. It's nuts, the complexity and the lack of visibility that they have. And so when we come in with our technical solution and we say, from this point onwards, for each campaign, you need to share the detailed fee on who makes what's the agency cut, what's the, for what assets that are developed. It completely changes the landscape for the brand and for the agency. And like I said, it creates a level of discomfort at first that you experience firsthand, apparently.
Well, as we said, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming without their bathing suit on. That's not the mantra for the company, but that's what it was.
And so it creates a level of discomfort that everybody has to deal with, because to stay with your analogy, it's the emperor with no clothes is the first thing that you get to see. But we've seen, and like I said, what we've seen is that once you get over that hump, it creates an opportunity for the brand, the creators, and the agencies to do better, because now you have a baseline, now you know, and you can improve upon what you're doing. And on the brand side, it creates this amazing effect that when the person in charge of creator marketing can go in front of the CMO and the CMO in front of the CFO and explain why they need to 10x their investment. Because now they know.
That's the key question. And for creators, I think it's challenging because they don't realize what it takes behind the scenes, because all they experience is someone like Kristen saying, hey, I got a deal for you for 10 grand, it's gonna be this, blah, blah, blah. What's happening behind the scenes, way back in the supply chain, is the CMOs going to the CFO and the CEO saying, I need $10 million for my media budget. And they're saying, okay, so you're gonna bring in $100 million worth of revenue for that? And there is this entire gymnastics equation and, you know, modern dance moves that go on where they're contorting themselves to try to deliver that. And until you have that kind of data that is very specific, it's still, creator marketing is still going to be a tactic. That's why most brands and media agencies stick with straight media buying, because it's really simple, it's measurable to the degree that it is, it's accepted, and nobody gets fired for buying a TV ad. You don't. But if you can't measure and explain that you don't value what you don't measure, is the phrase. If you can't explain at least the parameters of your creator marketing campaign, it's like you're begging for money. If you prove that it works, then you're golden. So for all of us in this room who are invested in the creator economy as our employment and our future, we want this to happen so that the CFO and the CEO are saying, okay, this is great, let's keep going.
Absolutely. It's the, you know, the pain when you first receive a vaccine, like that pinch is what we need to get over with, because what's on the other side again is better for everybody. But for sure, that's the core challenge, is how do we get to a space where we have enough information, enough data to scale that category. The one thing I was going to say, so my background before starting this company in tech was in marketing attribution. So I used to count the beans on building marketing mix modeling. So I was doing all the data side in a world that was pre-creator economy. And it baffled me to see that brands have been able to spend as much money as they have, in the tens of billions of dollars, on the back of fairly limited and shallow data on the performance that they're able to demonstrate. And the only reason why it happened is because the other side of that equation that is much clearer, whether it's on its affiliation, and so the conversion to sales, or the traditional digital marketing and digital ads, performance started plummeting. And as these known KPIs, so the key performance indicators for the brands were going down, a lot of brands started looking for alternatives, any alternative, to something that could be better than this. And so we got into a space, but we haven't built that infrastructure quite yet. I mean, we are attempting to do it, and we're in the process with our clients to do it. But as an industry, we're not there yet in building all the plumbing, to stay with your analogy, that will get us there.
I'm going to just ask a geeky question. Does anybody in this room know what an MMM study is? Okay, there's 5 people. An MMM study is what brands and their agencies use to determine where their money goes for advertising. And those models are outdated. They've only just in the last, say, 2 years started to factor in creator marketing as an input in terms of what model spits out you should spend and it always used to say you need more TV, always. And so it would say 70% of your spend should be in TV, and that's 40% cable, whatever it might be. Now it's connected TV, and then outdoor, whatever it might be. And creator wasn't in those models, and it's usually about 2 years of data that are correlated to sales. So the idea is the model says if you spend $10 million on TV, you're going to get X amount of sales. And that is how advertising is run. It's an overly complex system that I've simplified, but that's basically how it runs. And now creator marketing is being integrated into MMMs, but most people in the business don't know what that is, because we speak creator, we speak, how to make a great piece of content. The full 360 of understanding what's happening on the brand side, which is where the money comes from, that's critical.
Awesome. I'll ask one last question, and then I'll turn it to you guys. We have a mic in the middle of the room for anyone who may have questions. My last question to each of you is, give me one recommendation that you make to the people in this room, if you're a brand, if you're a creator, if you're an agency. So I guess 3 recommendations.
If you're a brand, check every part of your content supply chain and know how it works, and make sure all the plumbing is connected, and don't assume anything. And then make sure the people that are working on your creator marketing have a 360 view of the entire campaign.
If you're an agency, my recommendation would be to start creating those standards so you don't contribute to the pay gaps and have bias, be part of that process. If you're a creator, I would highly recommend taking yourself very seriously. There is so much hoopla and conversation around creators, and how we're dismissed and demeaned. Don't do that to yourself. Don't be part of that. You have to take yourself seriously. You have to run it like a business. And it doesn't mean you can't still be whimsical and still be effervescent and creative. Doesn't mean you can't still dress like this, But you do have to take yourself seriously, and really, if you need a lawyer to look at contracts, have a lawyer look at contracts. Always have a lawyer look at contracts. And if you're a brand, just trust that creators talk to each other, that this transparency will be happening regardless of whether or not you're involved in the process, and you want it to end up on your side. So whether that's working through organizations like Tracker to make sure that data is standardized so that you have that for yourself, it's already happening. And so if you want to be in on that, I would just recommend getting part of the process, because otherwise you won't have control of it, and that's not good for the brand side.
Yeah, I think if you're a brand, do your due diligence on your agency that you're using, which means saying, hey, can I look at the contracts that you're sending out to creators? Can I see the template? Read through it yourself and try not to be too scared. If you are a creator agency, I would say do feedback. Get feedback from the creators that you're working with, and try to see how they're perceiving you as an agency and the campaign as a whole, because that will obviously make you better at your jobs. And then I think as a creator, keep the conversation around pay transparency going, because it's still 2025. We have a huge way to go in terms of creators getting paid fairly and setting a market rate that's fair, and we have a lot of work to do.
We have a gauntlet out there.
I know. I'll do one in 30 seconds. Brands, you need to start saving your data today. To Jamie's point, especially with AI models coming out, you need months or years of data to train them. So as we're moving to a model that is much more automated in making recommendation on where to spend your money, you need to start saving and accruing that detailed historical information to train your AI models, because it's coming. For creators, what you said, I think is perfect. Just ask for feedback. Ask for feedback, request that debrief with the agency and with the brand after you run a campaign. And for agencies, your unique value proposition is not operating in the shadows. Your unique value proposition is a special skill that you bring that got you hired with a brand. Focus on that. And it's okay to share the data, because what your job becomes is just to outperform your competition. And that will be my 3. Okay, moving on to the room. Excited.
Okay.
Good conversation.
So I probably sit more on the agency side, so I'm a little naive to the everyday realities of what the creator's dealing with. So I guess 2 questions. How often do you as a creator work with the media team in identifying an audience and just helping them understand best where to put that piece of content? And secondly, what other costs are you incurring generally for your production? Lighting, stylists, that kind of thing.
So, okay, the first one, I'll do the reverse. Basically, for no, I won't. Okay, so when it comes to working with brands or like talking to media agencies, I'm rarely doing that with like a consumer product, like, you know, like Dove soap or, you know, whoever it is. That never happens with me. Where it does happen, where I think it's really effective, is when I do campaigns with the Nuclear Threat Initiative or the NRDC or organizations that are more progressive social organizations and that will bring me on as a consultant as well as a content creator so that I can help them build out what those campaigns could look like, specifically as it relates to my show, Smarter in Seconds. I think those tend to be more effective. I think that you can look at the metrics on recent partnerships that I've done and see that kind of just like in the, you know, in the organic returns. So it doesn't happen as often, I think, in the product markets, but it does happen a lot in the progressive organizations. And then for the costs that I'm incurring, time, a huge part of it is labor. A lot of content creators are, so I edit my own videos, I do my own makeup, I dress myself. Sometimes my mom dresses me. My mom used to be a designer, so I'm going into her wardrobe all the time. And then I also have a full-time staff who I pay $80,000 to be on full-time salary with like, you know, pay benefits and like also having healthcare to really run it like a business, because I need somebody at sometimes 10 p.m. to look through content, and I need somebody to be able to be there. And so I hire her as like my creative side. And so I think that's a good question to ask to content creators, because some folks also, in addition to having a full-time staff, are also hiring an editor, are also hiring photo. But when I get a bigger fee, I'm able to devote it to those things and be able to go, okay, let's hire a set. This time I'm not going to be the one to edit it. We can use a DSLR instead of my iPhone. And so when a brand comes to me based on the scale of what they're paying for, I'm able to do more for them, and being able to communicate that to them is really helpful.
Hi, my name is Maddie. So I do a few different things, but I am a micro content creator, and then I also work for an in-house social agency called Soci Studio as part of the Deutsch New York brand. So that's kind of where I live.
With Ashley?
Yes, with Ashley, exactly. So a lot of what I do is, you know, kind of, I feel like I have an interesting perspective because I am working directly with brands on a daily basis as a content creator, but then I'm also going into my day job and, you know, working with brands and being the person that's helping to source the creators and hire the creators and negotiate with the creators. So something that I was really curious about in talking about pay structure is, for the whole panel, have you heard of payment based on KPIs and this move kind of to, you know, say to certain creators, like you'll only get your full fee if you reach a minimum reach or impression requirement for final payment. It's something that I've learned of recently, and I think it's really interesting because as a micro creator, I kind of hate it, knowing that the algorithm can be extremely unpredictable. However, from the brand side, I can really understand it, especially when brands are thinking about how to, you know, pinch pennies and negotiate with the agencies as well as the influencers. So I would love your perspective on that.
What I find is that a lot of the larger creators know what their average yield will be, and some of them will say, I'm going to guarantee you this much. This is for bigger creators. I'm going to guarantee you this many impressions. If I go above it, you bonus me. If I go below it, I'll do a make good.
Okay, that's really interesting.
So, sorry, as a content creator, I've never used that model. I know a lot of TikTokers use that. I think it can be really terrifying because you can't guarantee what the return will be, and I think it's bad for micro creators. I think it's bad for bigger creators, especially if you don't have the ability, like I do with my progressive organizations, to like dictate, like, this is what I'd like to make, this is what I think will work. If they kind of give you, like, we need you to hold this up and say, buy it, then you're kind of stuck in parameters of how, well, I really think it's a scheme to underpay people, and I think the bonus model is a much more effective and equitable way to do that.
Yeah, agree. I'm really not a fan of that because as creators, you're still doing the work. You're still putting in the hours of the editing. And so I think I've definitely seen some structures where it's like maybe a lower base, but then you have a promise of affiliate earnings or extra based on performance. But I think really for most creators, like that's a no.
So yes to base pay and bonus is what we see most often, performance bonus. The one exception is affiliation. When working with creators to sell products, then it is a commission model, so it's all variable.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Say hi to Ashley. Say hi to Ashley.
Hi.
Hi there.
Okay, hi. My name is Abimisola. I guess I'm a video producer / social media consultant. My question is for Blair. It's creator focused. Hi. So a lot of the talk today has been more about like transparency between like agencies and brands. Like what happens to a micro creator who doesn't have like an agency and that kind of thing? And I think that's where the transparency is most necessary because you're just starting out and you really don't know what to do. So I freelance, I'm a social media consultant, and there are a lot of like databases that exist where people will anonymously submit, this is my years of experience, this is the type of work I do, this is how much I charge. Do you think that this kind of thing can exist amongst creators, and do you think that that's something that they would be willing to, do?
I think that it's a very informal structure. I think it happens a lot of times in group chats. If you end up, being on I just did this recently where I was hired to be on a panel, and my friend had just spoken, and we've worked together a while, and I was like, well, here's what they paid me. I hope they're paying you the same, when it comes to that. Same thing with this panel, actually, with folks at Tracker, my friends, the Lipstick Lesbians, who y'all might know from TikTok. They did an event with Tracker, and we both, did this in exchange for being able to have access to the rooms and, just, kind of mind meld. So I was like, did they pay you? And they were like, no. And I was like, cool, they didn't pay me either. Equitable.
Yeah.
But those are the conversations that are happening. And so I think outside of that, it's so important. But there's organizations like Ladies Get Paid. You have the Glassdoor for Influencers that is, being able to review the process after the fact. But I think it's so important to, I'm actually very for a creators union. I think that we need to unionize. We need to have better standards and conditions in general. So I want to take it all the way, big socialism. Let's do it. Because I think that's what we're going to need in order to standardize the process, just like, actors have had to do. Right now we need that type of protection because what's to say that these AI content creators, AI slop, is going to be taking, the work that we're doing. And so I think that working with Tracker as a content creator is one of the best things that we can do to be able to push brands towards that direction as we organize creators ourselves to be able to have more of that transparency. But I think there's a lot of reluctance. There's a lot of people who believe that if I talk to you about how much I'm getting paid, then I'm suddenly going to get paid less, which isn't true. It's one of the biggest lies that capitalism tells us. And so being able to arm people with that knowledge and to have a kind of collective mindset, I think is inherently part of content creation because it is so grassroots. But it's going to start with the micro content creators. It's not going to be the folks who have multi-million followers who don't have to worry about that. It's going to be the folks who are freelancers, who are doing the consulting. So I think the more we talk about it in spaces like this and elsewhere, the better it'll be.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, side note, your comment on vaccines, that made me really happy as a public health girly. Thank you.
Hi there. Great talk, by the way. My name is Julio. I'm the founder and the CEO of Crosswold. We're an ad agency, influencer marketing platform, and we're trying to solve what you guys are also talking about, the pricing. Been collecting data for the last 10 years on what to pay influencers, and I agree with everyone in terms of what is happening in the industry, but I think there is more of a top scenario, and this is a question to you, Jamie, where we work with Fortune 100 companies, and for agencies that we work with and creators, they don't really understand that some of these bigger companies, it takes 60 or 90 days for the agencies to get paid. So there's a big gap where agencies don't have that liquidity to pay the influencers quicker. So have you seen any solution around that? And for the creators as well, in terms of transparency?
There's starting to be. I was on a panel last year, and one of the speakers was at WPP, which is one of the biggest holding companies. Used to be the biggest, now it's I think the third. But they were talking about it's just too hard because of all of they're public, they're so big, it takes so long, and that's fine. I've started to see a few solutions. I know Tracker's starting to talk about having a pool of dollars available that it can get immediate payment. But there's also a company called Breaker, B-R-E-K-R, that's also starting to make it so that they can loan the money and they take 2%. It's debt financing, so that they can get the creator agencies paid and get their money immediately. So there are starting to be those things, but it hasn't been common practice because there's not enough pressure from the people getting paid to be able to mandate that. So they can get away with, well, we're too big, we just can't turn it around that fast.
So the example I shared earlier where I was talking about the campaign from a bank that was talking about like black women and equal pay, it was directly, so it was one of the, Fortune 500 companies and, public company. They just paid everybody separately directly. And I think that was really smart and tidy because it could have gone so bad. And that way, like the content creators ourselves are like, okay, the money is on the way. I can see the transparency. But Bill.com, which is what the payment, went through, was they have that same debt financing where it's like, if you'll just give us 5%, we'll give it to you right now, we promise. And so I think platforms like that are going to be more and more popular because a lot of content creators are living, content creators might make a lot of money at the end of the year, but it's extremely sporadic. And I think that lack of stability is what creates a lot of those problems. And so more stability is better. But I think it's an excuse. And I think when we start seeing people, like if we get our creators union, right, we start seeing more demands, then it'll become more of a standardized process because when they need to make money move, they can make the money move. They just don't feel like they need to.
Sorry, Pierre. A follow-up question then. I've seen a lot of brands don't understand that creators are running their own companies, their own businesses. And I feel like some talent agencies and talent managers don't share that information to their brands, so it makes it hard for the brands to understand how important it is for the creators to get paid in time, have staff and so forth like that. So is it predominantly sort of like there's the brand with all this money and there are the creators trying to make that money, and there's a lot of middle people in the middle there that are not sharing the information correctly, being transparent or fair along there?
So I don't know that information sharing for sure can be a part of it, but again, being on the ground with the brands, I think the problems are much more down to earth. It's the way most large companies are structured, they can't take on a creator as a vendor. Mm-hmm. Like just that going through that process on SAP, which is often their backbone, is impossible. And same goes with issuing purchase orders, same goes with issuing invoices. None of these things are flexible. And so you have a system that's been built over the years, intended to be reliable and inflexible, meeting a world that is very different today. So I think it's just, even if the brand were to know, I don't know they would know what to do with it. And it's in using partners, partners like us, where we're trying to do things like what Jamie was describing. So have a purchase order that can be issued with a bucket of money that the brand can leverage, and they can pay the creator as they deliver. Mm-hmm. And it's readily available, and it's all been prepaid and pre-assessed. But these things are not easy logistically to be managed by brands. Guys, I'm getting the signs from the back of the room.
Thanks, everybody.
But yeah. I promise we'll stick around if you have your questions, so we won't leave you hanging.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to be on the panel now as well.
All right, fine.
But we should
Thanks for your question. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just ping me on LinkedIn.
Y'all did so great.
Okay.